Welcome, everybody, to episode number 4. So, we are having our group discussion about the ideas that I presented in episode number 3, why we question our desires. And as we did in episode number 2, I'm just going to do a recap for Tristen and Santi. I'll tell you what I presented, and then we can have our discussion about these ideas. Welcome to the Philosophy in Real Life podcast, where we strive to live meaningful lives by pursuing truth and unmasking the lies in our culture. I'm your host, Carlos Santos, a philosophy PhD from Spain. Welcome to Season 2, The Ethics of Desire. Yeah, so basically what I tried to do in episode 3 is to show that these competing desires that we have actually create an inner conflict in us, right? And so in this conflict, we have to find a way of discerning which desire to follow, right? Because as I was telling you guys, we have many desires and many times these are incompatible. So how do we discern what desire to follow? And something we realize if we pay close attention to moral deliberation is that this moral evaluation actually reveals something unique about us, that we are moral agents with second order desires that question these desires or these reflections that helps us see what we want to do despite maybe having an incompatible desire. So basically we have a way of evaluating, of assessing, of like, is this desire really worth following? And so this evaluation that we carry out in our daily life reveals, so to speak, our moral nature as agents. And we looked at different ideas, but I think that the most important thing here is to just recap the Harry Frankfurt's 2 levels of desire, right? So Harry Frankfurt, I love Harry Frankfurt. He distinguishes between first order desire, which is a basic desire to do or to have something, right? For example, I want to eat. And the source of this desire is quite obvious. Biology, right? So I want to eat because I'm dehydrated, I'm hungry, or I'm dehydrated and I want to drink something. But then we have a second order desire, which is what differentiates human being from other species, right? Other species doesn't have the second order desires. So the second order desires would be a desire about a desire. It's basically almost like a meta desire. You can think about this, for example, I don't want revenge, or I don't want, I don't know, infidelity or something like that. It's or the typical example of a smoker who is trying not to smoke. It's like, man, I want to smoke, but I really want to not want to smoke. Right? It's almost like a desire that rises above the basic, more intense body-based type of desire. And so and in my language, which this is not Harry Frankfurt language, this is something that I cue in my own philosophy, my thesis, is that I distinguish this between biological desires, which in Harry Frankfurt language is the first order desire, and then we will have the meta-biological desires, or desires that are about something beyond the biological, and their source of these desires would be morality, what we say, moral reflectiveness. And this is unique to human beings. This is unique to human beings. So at least that was my claim. So a simple way of defining what is moral agency. Moral agency is the capacity that a human being has of evaluating their basic desires in light of higher ideals like ethics and things like that. So this reflectiveness that we have. And so that's basically, Tristen and Santi, the big idea I presented, the framework, and why we question our desires. And to just answer in a line, this why we question our desires. Well, we question our desires because we are not animals. We are human beings with a moral agency, with moral capacity to reflect on our desires based on their worthiness, not just based on the pleasure that they give us or the satisfaction.
Yeah.
Anyways, I opened the table, so to speak, for any of you.
I was thinking about. Go ahead, Tristen.
No. Go Santi.
I was just thinking about how we, especially in modern society, hate the conflict of desires and having contradictory desires that go against each other. And it has a lot to do with the fact that, obviously we have the principle of pleasure, but that this just opens the door to escapism at such intense levels that like we just observe on a day-to-day basis. And like I think the reason, thinking about this framework more, that escapism is so appealing is that it's kind of a way to avoid having these contradictions in our desires that go against each other, because you kind of get to exist in a reality where you can have it all, whether that's your own mind, whether that's playing Skyrim for 12 hours a day, or just pick, you know, your world and realm that people escape to. And yeah, it's just like it made me think about like our modern society and how we struggle with having that moral agency, because it just presents us with such a difficult decision of where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tristen, were you going to say something?
I was thinking about, I keep going back to this idea of where do these thoughts live, or where do these feelings live, or these desires live? And I think it comes from a conversation I had with my dad about, like, I've been thinking about coding, or I was thinking about like a hard drive and the limited space that a hard drive has. And I was thinking about the brain, and I was like, as though it was a hard drive. I'm like, does the brain have limited space, or is it unlimited? Like, can we technically have an unlimited amount of knowledge? Like, sure, we forget things, but like you can then remember things that you forget. And it almost feels like forgetting is a way to give yourself more space. And anyways, I was just having this conversation about like, where do thoughts live and all that. And I keep thinking about this idea of we're talking about ourselves, this personal, right? So I have this feeling of I'm hungry, but then I have another feeling of I have this other desire that tells me what I should or shouldn't eat, right? So my first order desire is I'm hungry and I want food, but then my second order desire is like, well, actually, maybe my first order desire is I'm hungry, but what do I do, right? And this kind of goes back to our last conversation about a child feels hunger but doesn't know that food is the thing that's going to make them feel satisfied. So they have to be taught that food is that thing, right? So I know that food is the thing that will make me feel satisfied, but now I have to make a decision on what food that is. Will it be pizza, or will it be, I don't know, chicken, rice, and broccoli, right? And now I have this, perhaps a desire to eat pizza, but then this other desire to not gain too much weight and then instead eat chicken and whatever it is, right? So these are things that I feel like I can understand, but then I feel like I want to take it a step further. We also apply this to other people, right? So somebody else in front of us, maybe that we care about or whatever it might be, let's say a coworker, they have a desire to do something, but then you have a desire on behalf of them for them to maybe do or not do that thing. Let's say a coworker wants to cheat on something, and you have this desire for them not to cheat. And I just think I'm just thinking about this idea of like our ability to extrapolate desires, not that have not only to do with ourselves and the impact on ourselves, but also its impact on other people. And like, why do we have that? Why do we desire things for other people that may not have anything to do with us? And I think that's an interesting place that desire.
Yes.
Goes.
So let me see how I respond to this in a brief manner. But I think that you will find this fascinating. So in my dissertation, one of the things that I did in the first part of my thesis, which occupied 200 pages of academic writing, was basically trying to come up with, so to speak, they call it transcendental structures of selfhood. But what that just means is, if we were to say that in just common language, not in technical philosophical language, we would say something that what are the what would you say, fixed, unchanged, permanent features of human beings from all times and from all places? What are those features or characteristics of personhood that is applicable, that is universal to all human beings across time and culture, right? So that's what we mean by transcendental structure. For example, we would say that all human beings is universal, that all human beings, without having damaged organs and things like that, have a linguistic capacity. They have language, some form of language. We would say something like that. Or they have, so the content of the language or the system of the language or the communication that might vary. You speak English, I speak Spanish, blah 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 blah, or sign language even, or like Q form or whatever. There are many systems of language and things like that. But they have it's almost like the hardware that our brain has the capacity to communicate. It's almost like it's a built-in capacity if developed in practice and in your linguistic community to actually speak a language and communicate with fellow human beings. Does that make sense? So in anthropology or philosophical anthropology, we will call this a transcendental structure. This is part of the human condition. It's almost like a constant in all human beings, right? Okay, so let's talk about this, but apply to morality. Because you are saying, do these metabiological desires, or this idea that not just me, but other people have to abide by this type of standard that we perceive that is true, right? This law or this moral law or whatever, right? So, for example, you ought to be a good father, or you ought not to kill another human being that is innocent, for example. And so you find similar moral codes across time and culture. So the justification for it might be different. You might do that to respect that all human beings were created in the image of God, or you might respect the life of other people just because of the life of your ancestors, or human potentiality, or just human rationality. Depends on who you ask, right? They might have a different justification for that moral duty or moral intuition that killing an innocent human life is actually something wrong, and it requires a special kind of pleading justification to actually suspend the rule, right? And so you find that, and it's quite strange because anthropologists and philosophers for the longest time were like, it seems to be that there is a natural law, like Cicero, for example. Cicero and Marcus Aurelius and all of these people in ancient traditions, they were already recognizing that there is a natural law. Is this a logos, a cosmic logos, a moral order that is almost imposed on us without our consent, and we feel compelled to actually abide by that moral law. And it seems to be that it's intrinsic to all human beings, to the human condition, right? And so it's almost like it's innate in us to some degree, if developed. Like language is something similar to this. It's almost like we have this moral awareness that if we grow and we are nurtured without being damaged tremendously by something extremely traumatic, it seems to be that we have this capacity for moral evaluation. In this sense, that has been, in a way, a mystery, and in a way, the topic of conversation of many philosophers and many sociologists and many anthropologists, right? That it seems to be that we cannot do without. And so, for example, Charles Taylor, the Canadian philosopher that I did my thesis, he would say that human identity is inescapably linked to a conception of the good. Basically, being a human means being oriented by a conception of the good, by a hyper good, a higher or a supreme good. Meaning, in order for you to live as a human agent, that means basically in practice that you are guided by a conception of the good, by a higher principle that is guiding your action and is helping you discern what you ought to do and what you ought not to do. And that seems to be inescapable. Putting another way, we are always speaking and acting out and making decisions from a moral orientation that we take to be true, from a moral standard that we take to be true. And not only us, but also other people. And even those liberal societies that proud themselves of like just defending people's liberty, they have a very narrow conception of liberty. And as soon as you violate what they deem as freedom or liberty, they will be extremely intolerant toward those people who are going against their ideals. You know what I mean? So in the end, there's no neutral space. Neutrality is just a myth. It's not. No, we are always speaking from a moral orientation, from a moral filter, from a moral standard that we take to be true. And we think that other people also ought to abide. Why? Somehow we are de facto committed to it. And you're like, whoa, what do you mean? Yeah, somehow, like hunger, we are just hungry because we have a digestive system. So somehow we are compelled by this moral nature that we have in us, and is in us, is built into us, and is built into all cultures, all society. We can debate whether or not there is convergence in moral codes from different cultures and things like that, but that's a different topic. We're just discussing that. It seems to be something,
this idea of morality,
constant in human nature and human condition, that we have this moral self built into us.
Well, what's your argument against that being learned behavior? Like if someone was to come to you and say, this is just learned across cultures?
I think
How would
that
you
here
argue
we
against that?
no, but okay, yes, I would argue against it because culture or education does not create moral duty. This moral duty, this pulling of that you ought to do something, it just gives you the justification on how to apply that in a context, right? For example, like we see in many societies that are more like religious and things like that, it's like, oh, you should respect your elders because they sacrifice everything for the tribe, or you were created in the image of God, or because we are all united and everything is Maya. I'm using like Hinduism and things like that, right? Maya, an illusion. We are not otherness. We are all together really as one thing. We are just seeing reality different. So the justification for it might change, but they don't create this moral duty that we already have in us. The moral duty is almost like built into us. It's almost innate. Now, how we justify it or in what cases we suspend the rules, that's a very different things. And I know that evolutionary biologists, for example, try to explain this away by saying something like, oh, it was useful for our survival to be kind to other people, right? And things like that. But that doesn't even explain how we hold this universal benevolence as an ideal, or why people die for other people.
Or why we're so unkind. That's something
why
that I
they
struggle
were
with. It's like,
yeah,
it seems like we're more predisposed to being unkind to each other and distrustful than we are to
right.
be kind.
And not only that, but they would say things like moral values are explained away by there's no moral law outside of us or something like that. There is just, it's evolutionary biology. And they would say that because of evolutionary biology, truth is not really a thing. It's just what's useful. The funny part to me is that they all have a self-defeating philosophy, because if all truth is a construct based on survival and convenience to be able to just move, to push through our species and things like that, then what makes you think that you as an evolutionary biologist have the vantage angle or point of view to actually claim something like that as a true statement for all human beings? It's almost like it's like relativism, right? It's like, oh, all truth is relative. Like, there's no ultimate truth. Yeah, well, the only ultimate truth is that there's no ultimate truth. Well, you don't get to do that. You don't get to. You are cheating. You don't get to do that. You know what I mean? Or when people psychologizes and answer, oh, you are just saying that because you have internalized patriarchy. It's like, okay, well, what makes you? But I could also give back to you and say, oh, you are just saying that because you have internalized misogyny or whatever. You know, so you there is, when you use this rhetoric of like, this is explained away just by these processes. It's like, okay, what makes you exempt from this process itself? Because you are also the result of evolutionary biology.
I want to go back to something Tristen said that I thought was really interesting. I don't know if Harry Frankfurt or whatever his name is gets into it, but it seems like we're pretty bad at following second order desires a lot of the time. So I'm wondering if he gets into a little bit about the different dynamics of why, even though this sort of logos or whatever you want to call it is imposed upon us, we often do not listen.
Well, the Harry Frankfurt does in his article the concept of a person or the will or something like that. He doesn't get into those details. You can actually read it. It's a quite short article. It's like 20 pages, and it's actually quite good. But he doesn't get into that. He just gets into describing what makes us different from other species. If human beings are just animals, well, we're a very weird animal, because we seem to have a capacity for moral reflectiveness that no other species have. And we know that. We know that because, again, you don't take a lion to court for eating a human being, but we do take a human being to court for eating another human being, because we know that you should resist the desire of cannibalism. Somehow we know that. And so that's the idea, is that we have an agency that is very different from the animal kingdom. So that's what I'm trying. So he just gets to that. You know, it's a more descriptive type of like way of studying human beings. Now, if you study the tradition, I mean, it is different answers given. For example, in the Christian tradition, you would say original sin or just sinful nature. You know, to be more broad, you would say that is the biggest impediment, and how you actually come to obey the second order desires or the ethical ideals. Well, you really can't, because you cannot save yourself. That would be the answer of the gospel. That's why Jesus had to do it for you. That's basically it. But the goodness itself is there. For example, Paul would speak of second order desires as the written law in our hearts, or moral conscience. You could understand it like that. And so, and for other people, for example, for the Platonic tradition would be ignorance. Lack of knowledge would be the source of evil action. So somebody that really knows that they are doing something evil would not do the evil, according to the Greek. This is called intellectualism, moral intellectualism. This is called, this idea that education is the solution to bad deeds or evil. Ignorance is the root cause.
I wonder, I don't know if you had a response to that.
Yeah, but go for it.
I was just gonna say that, like, two things. One, the one thing that it makes me think about is actually exactly how Paul describes it, right? Where it's like or actually how Jesus describes it, is that you're enslaved to your desires in a way, right? Like, the idea is that, like, we have, and I guess this is this works for what we're talking about, right? Is we have desires, and the problem that we have is that we are enslaved to those desires. And so it's sort of like we have two problems. One, we have desires and they just sort of come, right? Like, they just sort of arrive, right? Like, I have a desire. Like, one day I wake up and I want Peruvian food, but the next day I wake up and I want McDonald's or something like that, but I'm enslaved, but it's like I'm enslaved to that. Like, there's something in me that just really, really, really wants this thing, and so
you're not self-sufficient. You are a creature of desire, of endless desires.
I'm a creature of endless desire, but not just that, but but not just that. It's sort of, but it's like I can't get rid of them. It's so hard to just get rid of that desire, to like say no to that desire. And that's like one, like, it's an interesting thing, but like, so again, anyways, I guess what the way that Jesus would describe it is that, like, every single person is a slave to something, right? And that may be those desires, or maybe your second order desires, whatever they might be. The other thing I was going to, and you can make a comment on that, but the other thing I was going to say was, what did you say, Carlos? You said, it was something about, you said.
About what?
I can't remember. I don't know. What was the last thing you said?
I don't know. What did I say?
Whatever.
Think on it. I'll respond to what you said.
I'll think on it, but yeah, you can respond to what I said. Yeah.
I was thinking about how the fact that it seems like a lot of spiritual traditions, at least part of the response to this problem, is kind of the opposite of the modern response. Like, if the modern response is escapism and how can I find ways to have it all at once, a lot of the ancient traditions, I think, are how can I learn to deny some of my first order desires, to learn to control them, right? In a way for my second order desires to actually reign. And I had this experience because I'm a Christian, but I didn't really fast for most of my time as a Christian. Like, it was just kind of one of those like neglected spiritual disciplines that I dismissed.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like it.
Shout out John Mark
Comer. Yeah, literally.
Then everybody started listening to John Mark Comer.
JMC.
It's pretty simple.
And we're like, I'm going to start fasting in Shabbat.
Don't expose me like that. But yeah, like,
it's okay.
But I think the switch was, fasting is a way for me to get something from God because he's going to listen to me more if I'm in a fasted state. There's actually something about fasting that rewires my brain. And it sort of starves this like first order desire that can feel so intense, and that I can see more clearly, like, no, there's like a more enlightened path. And it just, like, I think it's so counterintuitive to the way we just operate as societies. I mean, I'm here in South America. It's the same here as it is in the United States. Of course, it takes like different forms, but I think that's it has to be at least part of the answer to how effective we can be to change those first order desires over time.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think that you are completely right about the comparison between ancient traditions and modernity. Because in ancient traditions, again, the good was outside you, and then you would change. You would look within yourself and say, "Hey, desires align according to the good." No, that is outside you. You are not the creator of the good, And so you understood that there was a law or something beyond you, and you have to align yourself. But in modernity, again, we go to our community, and they need to honor what is inside. Otherwise, we call them oppressive and intolerant and things like that. It's almost like, no, in order to find truth, we go inside of our desires, and then we tell everybody that they have to respect, or we demand other people to respect what is inside us, instead of changing ourselves to what is actually good, or something that is beyond us. So you see a huge shift in that attitude. And even again, it's there with breathe. A lot of people do not even know they do it, but when you hear them making decisions or how they react to situations, you will realize that, oh, so you are the locus of the good. Like you are the place of the good. Like you have to look inside, then you demand that everybody has to agree with you just because you have this desire or this feeling about yourself. So that's a big issue. That's a big issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I really like, what you say. And yes, I think different religions and different traditions have offered different ways of overcoming this big obstacle, For example, for Plato and Aristotle in the Greek tradition was the cultivation of what is known in academia as the virtue ethics. So by practicing, I don't know, justice or patience and things like that, then you become a different kind of person, which to some degree it overlaps a lot with the Christian tradition as well. But the difference is that in the Greek tradition, you are the source of the problem and you are the source of the solution. So the problem and the solution ends with you as a person, by your own technique, by your own arrangement, by biohacking and doing all of these things, you can arrive at harmony or at eudaimonia, the happy life, as the good life, as Aristotle would say. But in the Christian perspective, yes, there is a degree of sanctification in which you have to practice to become a holier person, a spiritual person, and that takes intentional practice, such as the spiritual disciplines of Sabbath or like meditation or contemplative prayer. You take your pick there. But the idea here is that in the Christian tradition, there has to be what is called a transformation of the will, a renovation of the heart. You know what I mean? That something has to profoundly be changed in your own nature. In the Greek tradition, no, your nature is fine. You are intellectia, like you have to just self-actualize what is there in you. But in the Christian tradition, it's like, no. You are lost and you need somebody to die for you and you cannot save yourself. And so, and then within that redeemed condition, then that's when this idea of the spiritual disciplines take place. But we need to distinguish, because a lot of people, I think that they take just Christian practices and they use it in a Greek way of like the biohacking and project self, and I do my own buffet of practices and meditations just for human fulfillment, and that's that. But the end of the Christian living is not really human flourishing. It's actually love, and love many times go against you preserving your own life. It calls you to die in the name of love, in the name of God, right? And so you see a very overlap, but also a big difference there.
Yeah, did you make me think of again, I've been kind of studying out Isaiah recently, and so, but you make me think of Isaiah 27, and and a lot of what's happening in Isaiah 27 is you actually have this dragon. Or a Leviathan, I believe, and which is, I can't get into all the symbolism right now, but basically think of it like the depiction of chaos,
Right.
like a monster of chaos, and that often represents some sort of kingdom or group of people. And in this case, it's either Assyria or Babylon. But anyways, think of just it's a kingdom that's going to destroy. All right, so this Leviathan destroys, but then God also says that He will also destroy the Leviathan, right? So you kind of have this. He allows sort of the monster to destroy, but then promises to also destroy that same monster. But there's ends up being this point where he's actually talking about Israel. He's actually talking about his people. And part of what he says is that he's going to allow this, basically the city to come to ruin. He's going to allow this monster, right, this kingdom, to destroy the city. And from the destruction of the city, there will then come eventually the promised Messiah is kind of what ends up alluding to. It talks about a day of atonement and things like that. But one of the points that's being made within Isaiah 27 is this idea that in order for the city to be new or to be renewed, it must be destroyed. Um, and it's like the evil and the chaos that lives within it must first be uprooted and destroyed for it to then become anew. And I think about, it makes me think about us, right? And this idea of, you just kind of like what you're saying, right? Like, no, there is an issue with your nature. It's not just that it's, you can say, yeah, your nature is fine, but there's this idea that no, there is something wrong with your nature and something has to die within it. Some sacrifice has to be made. Something within
Yeah.
you has to
Yeah.
choose to, you must die to yourself. And from that destruction, can you then, from the stump, actually, that's a lot of the thing is from the stump, there's this imagery of trees being cut down, right? These beautiful trees, lofty trees, all being cut down. And from that, you get a branch. And that's also that language of the stump of Jesse, there'll be a branch, but you get this, that's sort of us in a way, right? There's a need to be destroyed in order for something to be renewed, and it's an interesting way, I think, to think about our desires and our way to interact with our first order desires and our second order desires. So I don't know, it made me think of that, what you're saying.
Yeah,
And
I
that
mean,
makes me think
what
like it's really odd as well with the unwanted desires and how you can't just make them go away. Like part of me gets constantly frustrated, especially as you embark on that aim of, okay, I want to actually be the sort of person that my second order desires are indicating. But then the second you, I think once you make that decision is when you realize how incapable you are of doing it yourself, because you might last by your own willpower for a few days or whatever. You can try to hack it, but then there's just so many pervasive influences, both whatever you want to call the sinful nature or just how our society is, like the air we breathe, it's all around us. But it just, we I know you mentioned it, Carlos, how odd it is that humans, like we'd be odd creatures because we don't, you don't see animals going on hunger strikes, but it's also odd that we just live with such pervasive unwanted desires, and that often go unseen by everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if that's the beauty though of the Christian message, right? It's like it is this idea of destruction, but then like infinite amounts of mercy, right? It's like you can't do it. It's like I feel like that's one of the big differences I think with the Christian message. It's like you must die to yourself, but also you'll never be able to do that thing that you want to do in a way. And like that's where you get this outpouring of mercy, which I find it different than maybe the Stoics or the I hate to like call out other religions, I'm not trying to be a hater or anything like that, right? But there are concepts of I'm going to take away all desire, or I'm going to, it's like the solution to a lot of these is these extreme measures. And there's something, I don't know, beautiful about Jesus, about both things being true at the same time. A need to be destroyed, but then also an acknowledgement that we are incapable of perfection and require mercy because you just can't live the way that you're meant to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a very profound idea. The more I think about it, it really amazes me because I think that when you pay attention to what human beings are, you realize, okay, these are creatures that are not self-sufficient. They are creatures of desires because they need to survive. That's why they have biological needs. But then you realize that, oh, hold on a second. They also have something that is not just biological needs, because even though they are well fed and warm in their beds, they commit suicide from lack of meaning. And it's like, hold on a second, that's weird. This is a weird animal.
Yeah.
This is a weird creature.
Yeah.
And then you realize, okay, so they have metabiological desires. But it's even more surprising because in our moral agency, we realize, okay, so we perceive a moral standard that helps us evaluate our desires and discern between these desires what we should follow. But then we realize that we are also powerless in obeying this ideal behavior that this law or this moral principle in us is telling us to do. And it's almost like, hold on a second, not only I'm able to reflect, but also I'm incapable of even carrying out what I'm being called to do or to be, this higher way of being, right? And then it shows the powerlessness. And so what do you do with us? Well, that's the answer of human history, right? And religions and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that there is something there. There is something there. And I think that, yes, I think that the language of sacrifice and death is actually fitting And you see this in many tribes, these rites of initiation, the rites of passages, is that you let young men survive one night in the forest to actually see if they are capable to actually be a man and not just a boy. And and many kids die, right? Many kids die in the forest because they don't become men, but the ones that do become men of the tribe, and they are recognized by their community. It's almost like the boy had to die in the forest for the person to come, right? And some boys come bleeding and things like that. And I feel like sadly in Western culture, we don't have rites of passages. I wish we do. We do have them. People self-initiate with the iPhone, with pornography, with things like that. And they are dying by the thousands, like from suicide. The mortality rate by suicide is the highest right now among young men, for example, if I remember correctly. And so in Western countries, which we are well fed, but we have a crisis of meaning, you see? And I think that there is something about this idea of dying to this basic human being that is just driven by the principle of pleasure, and something about rising above it and following this and dying to this previous person. And again, there is so much wisdom in this rite of passages, in death and resurrection and things like that. But I think that definitely the wisdom of the tribes and religious communities were onto something. They really got something right there, And I think that we, in our scientific type of rationality, we have just called them like silly or people who were superstitious, but we have neglected so much of their moral wisdom and spiritual wisdom. Yeah. So anyways, I think that's a good place to stop, or no?
Yeah. No, it is a good place to stop. I just thought about this. Yeah, I'll say this quickly, and then if I was to conclude what you were just saying, it's more just to kind of like, I want to kind of get a conclusion, not a conclusion, but wrap up some of what you said, because I thought I want to kind of bring it back to this idea that you had, right, from the very beginning, from the just trying to look for it. Perception of the physical world, facts structured according to our desires, the world revealed as a place of values. And I think about it seems like we're getting to this place of, we all have desires, and those desires link us to value and meaning in the world. But the thing that we are, so we're trying to find meaning in this world, and the way that we access that meaning is through the desires that we have.
That's it.
But we find ourselves in society, and all societies, I'm sure, have found themselves here, but we can just talk about our society because that's the one that we're a part of. We find that we are I don't know, predisposed or whatever, but we are tempted to find meaning in our first order desires, and that's what we seem to be attempting to do and glorifying as a culture. But it seems to be failing us. It seems to be shooting us in the foot. And so now what we're trying to say, okay, we seem to also have these second order desires that conflict with these first order desires, but perhaps it's within the potential truth of those second order desires that we can find the kind of meaning that we're looking for. And we have to probably spend more time defining that, but it seems like that's the conclusions that we're getting to.
Yes, I think that there is a lot of confusion in the ethics of most people. They've been told that happiness is found in choosing and following your strongest desire at any given moment, or that freedom is found in just having independence and not being tied to any moral code or institution or tradition and things like that. So that's why I'm trying to do this work of really unpacking what is at stake and showing that no, actually not really. You are actually like being lied to, because the idea here is that if you follow some desires, they will lead you to gulags, concentration camps, broken families. And if you follow other desires that are worthy of being desired, like justice, love, benevolence, then they will build stronger families, not a fragmented self, but a whole self, a peaceful person and things like that. So it's not like the consequence of following one desire versus the other does not matter. No. It matters, and tremendously. Our life depends on it, literally. That's why people commit suicide, right? And so I think that we need to take this a lot more seriously. But we'll get to that in the following episodes, of course, because this is
I just wanted to
all right.
put it all together.
Man, this is so fun. I love just, it enriches so much what I just did in the solo episode that it almost feels like a different type of episode, but in a way, so good. I love it. Anyways, I hope the
awesome.
listeners today have enjoyed the conversation, quite raw. And if you have any question, leave your comments. You also have the companion guide to write your notes and things like that. And in the next episode, we are in episode number 4, right? Yes. So in episode number 5, we will explore more fully the main characteristics of the second order desires or metabiological desires, just to see clearly what they entail and also what it means, all of this for the ethics of desire, right? We'll dive deeper in the nature of the second order desire, how they shape our identity, and why they matter in our ethical life. That's why I have tried to keep it there. But yeah, we'll discuss more. And so that's my solo episode, and then we'll discuss in episode number 6, the following one. Anyways, it was good to be with you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.